Commander Yu Min was halfway through his third cup of coffee when the deep space monitoring equipment started screaming. Red lights flashed across every screen in the control room of Earth's most distant listening post. After 15 years of watching empty space, this was not how he expected his Tuesday morning to go. The signal was unlike anything in their databases. It came from beyond the outer rim, where no human had ever traveled. Yu Min's hands moved quickly across the control panels, trying to lock onto the transmission before it faded into cosmic background noise. His team of 12 technicians rushed to their stations, excitement and worry written across their faces. "Sir, this is definitely artificial," called out Lieutenant Park from the analysis station. "The pattern is too complex for natural phenomena. Someone out there is trying to talk to us." Yu Min felt his heart racing. First contact protocols existed, sure, but they were theoretical exercises that nobody really expected to use. He activated the recording systems and began the lengthy process of decrypting. The signal used mathematical concepts that proved whoever sent it was highly intelligent. 3 hours later, the message finally revealed itself. Yu Min wished it hadn't. The transmission contained video footage that would give him nightmares for years to come. 7 different alien civilizations, each more advanced than humanity, were being systematically destroyed. The attackers were creatures that looked like a nightmare mix of insect and fungus, spreading across planets like a living plague. The footage showed beautiful cities with crystal spires being consumed by writhing biological masses. Aliens with elegant features and advanced technology ran in terror as their world transformed into something from a horror movie. Children of different species cried as their parents were dragged away by creatures that seemed to multiply with every victim, they claimed. But the most disturbing part was how organized the destruction appeared. This wasn't random violence or natural disaster. The attacking creatures, which the message identified as the Vorthok Empire, had a clear strategy. They would target population centers first, then industrial areas, and finally convert entire ecosystems into breeding grounds for more of their kind. The message itself was desperate and formal at the same time. The remaining leaders of something called the Zephyrian Coalition explained that they represented the last free worlds of their region. They had tried everything: advanced weapons, diplomatic negotiations, even hiding in deep space. Nothing worked against an enemy that adapted to every defense and grew stronger with every victory. Their plea was simple, but heartbreaking. They had detected radio signals from Earth and knew another intelligent species existed here. They weren't asking for military help, understanding that humans were probably less advanced than they were. Instead, they begged for sanctuary, for any technology that might help, or even just for someone to remember their civilizations existed. Yu Min stared at the final image, a view of space showing dozens of dead worlds, their surfaces covered in the same writhing biological mass that had consumed 7 different alien civilizations. He reached for the emergency communication system. Earth's leaders needed to see this immediately, because Yu Min had a terrible feeling that humanity would be next on the Vorthok Empire's list. President Li Ho hadn't slept in 36 hours. The emergency meeting room in the underground bunker buzzed with tension as world leaders argued through video screens. Some called the alien message a hoax. Others worried it was an invasion trick, but the evidence was impossible to ignore. Military strategist Park Jun stood at the front of the room, clicking through horrifying images on the main display. His usually calm demeanor cracked as he showed footage of entire worlds being consumed. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is not a drill. 7 advanced civilizations have been wiped out by something called the Vorthok Empire." The Brazilian president leaned forward on her screen. "How do we know these aliens aren't lying? Maybe they're the real threat, trying to make us lower our defenses." Park Jun shook his head grimly. "Our analysis teams have been working around the clock. The physics in these videos check out. The energy signatures are consistent across all footage. This is real, and it's coming our way." Defense Minister Choi Min pulled up tactical displays, showing the galaxy's spiral arms. Red markers indicated dead Zephyrian Coalition worlds, while a green dot marked Earth's position. Based on their expansion pattern, the Vorthok will reach our sector within 5 to 10 years, maybe less if they accelerate their conquest. President Lee Ho studied the star maps with growing dread. The destroyed civilizations had technology far beyond anything humans possessed. They had energy shields, faster than light travel, and weapons that could crack planets. Yet none of it had stopped this biological nightmare. "What exactly are the aliens asking for?" asked the European Union representative. "Sanctuary," Park Jun replied, reading from the translated message. "They want us to hide their survivors. They're also hoping we might have some unique technology or perspective that could help fight the Vorthok." The room erupted in bitter laughter. The Chinese premier shook his head. "We can barely get to Mars reliably, and they want our help against something that destroyed civilizations thousands of years ahead of us." But President Lee Ho wasn't laughing. He was thinking about humanity's history, every war, every conflict, every time people said a fight was hopeless. "Park Jun, tell me about these Vorthok creatures. How do they actually fight?" "They're biological, sir. They adapt to energy weapons, absorb advanced technology, and use the resources of conquered worlds to create more soldiers. They seem to be a hive mind controlled by some kind of queen organism, and the coalition species." "How did they approach warfare?" Park Jun consulted his notes. "Highly advanced, but focused on defense. Their weapons were designed to disable, rather than destroy. They tried negotiation, containment, even evacuation strategies. Everything failed." President Lee Ho stood up slowly, his mind racing. While other leaders saw humanity's technological inferiority, he saw something else entirely. The Zephyrian Coalition had fought like civilized beings. They had rules, ethics, and limitations. Humans had something different. Humans had thousands of years of practice at total war. "I want every military leader on Earth in this room within 6 hours, Lee Ho announced. "We're not running from this threat, and we're not hiding coalition survivors in bunkers." The room fell silent. "We're going to kill these things before they reach Earth. All of them." Admiral Kim Da walked through the shipyard with purpose, her boots echoing against the metal floors. Around her, thousands of workers crawled over massive warships, like ants on a carcass. The smell of welding torches and engine fuel filled the air as humanity prepared for the largest military operation in its history. She paused beside the flagship, a monstrous dreadnought called the Iron Resolve. The ship was twice the size of anything humans had built before, bristling with weapons that most nations had banned from use on Earth. Nuclear torpedoes, kinetic bombardment systems, and experimental plasma cannons lined its hull like the teeth of some prehistoric monster. "Admiral, the coalition representatives are requesting another meeting," her aide, Lieutenant Han, reported, jogging to catch up. "They seem concerned about our military preparations." Kim Da almost smiled. Concerned was putting it lightly. When the first human ships had arrived at the coalition's hidden base, the aliens had expected scientists, diplomats, maybe some engineers. Instead, they got battle fleets that made their own defensive forces look like toys. Defense Minister Choi Min had made it clear from day one. This wasn't a rescue mission or a humanitarian effort. This was extermination. Every Vorthok creature would die, and any world they had touched would be cleansed completely. The coalition leaders struggled to understand this approach. Their most advanced civilization had tried containment strategies and defensive positions. They had built shields and barriers, hoping to wait out the biological invasion. The concept of total offensive warfare seemed to horrify them more than the Vorthok themselves. Kim Da entered the command center, where holographic displays showed the growing human fleet. Ships arrived daily from every corner of human space. Military vessels, converted cargo haulers, even civilian ships loaded with volunteers and weapons. The numbers kept climbing, 5,000 ships, then 8,000, then 12,000. "Ma'am, we're getting complaints from Coalition Command," reported Captain Yu from the communications station. "They say our weapons are too destructive. They're worried about collateral damage to surviving populations." Kim Da studied the tactical reports. The Vorthok had consumed entire star systems, turning billions of beings into biological material for their expansion. Yet the Coalition still worried about fighting too aggressively. "Tell Coalition Command that there won't be any collateral damage," Kim Da replied coldly, "because there won't be anything left to damage. We're not here to liberate Vorthok worlds. We're here to make sure they never exist again." The alien representatives had requested multiple meetings to discuss proportional response and post-conflict rebuilding. They couldn't grasp that humans had no intention of rebuilding anything. Every Vorthok breeding ground would be sterilized. Every infected world would be cracked open and left as a warning. Defense Minister Choi Min's orders had been crystal clear during their final briefing. The Vorthok had made one critical mistake when they decided to threaten Earth. They had picked a fight with a species that had turned warfare into an art form. Kim Do walked to the observation deck and looked out at the assembled fleet. 15,000 warships now filled the space around the Coalition base, more firepower than had ever been gathered in one place. The aliens watched in fascination and growing terror as humanity prepared to teach the galaxy what total war actually meant. The Vorthok had never faced an enemy like this before. Captain Hanji gripped the armrest of his command chair as the destroyer's swift vengeance cut through hyperspace at the front of humanity's war fleet. Behind him, 15,000 ships stretched across multiple dimensions, their engines creating a light show that would have been beautiful if it wasn't so terrifying. The journey to Vorthok space would take 4 months. 4 months of cramped quarters, recycled air, and the constant hum of weapons being prepared for war. Hanji had served in 3 colonial conflicts, but nothing had prepared him for commanding a ship in humanity's first interstellar war. Down in engineering, So wiped sweat from her forehead as she worked on the plasma cannon modifications. The Coalition had shared their energy weapon technology, hoping humans would adopt their more humane fighting methods. Instead, NASA was combining alien tech with human nuclear warheads to create weapons that made Coalition engineers physically sick. "These modifications violate every galactic warfare treaty," complained Veltar, the Coalition liaison assigned to the human fleet. The tall, blue-skinned alien watched in horror as NASA welded atomic triggers into plasma containment units. "Good thing we never signed those treaties," NASA replied, not looking up from her work. "Besides, your people tried playing by the rules. How did that work out?" Veltar had no answer. His homeworld was now a Vorthok breeding ground, its crystal cities replaced by writhing biological masses that stretched from pole to pole. Throughout the fleet, similar conversations were happening. Coalition observers watched human crews train with weapons their civilizations had banned centuries ago. Biological warfare canisters, planet-cracking missiles, and something humans called scorched earth protocols that involved destroying everything in a solar system to deny it to the enemy. The cultural differences became more obvious each day. Coalition species had evolved past their violent phases thousands of years ago. War was something their ancestors did, like using stone tools or living in caves. They had computers that could simulate any battle scenario and had concluded that defensive strategies were always superior. Humans had taken a different path entirely. Captain Hanji reviewed daily reports from his crew. Combat training exercises ran 20 hours a day. Soldiers practiced urban warfare in mock-ups of Vorthok hive structures. Pilots learned to ram their fighters into enemy positions if they ran out of ammunition. The human approach to warfare involved backup plans for backup plans, and every plan ended with massive explosions. Meanwhile, Coalition Command was holding emergency sessions about their human allies. Admiral Zarthik argued that humanity showed the same aggressive expansion patterns as the Vorthok. General Kivrin worried that humans might decide to conquer Coalition worlds after destroying the biological threat. They don't fight like any civilized species, reported Coalition observer Tilanara from the human flagship. They treat war like a natural disaster that must be survived, rather than a political problem to be solved. Their weapons are designed to eliminate entire populations, not just military targets. But as the months passed, and the fleet drew closer to Vorthok space, even the most worried Coalition leaders had to admit one thing. For the first time since the biological invasion began, someone was actually fighting back, instead of just running away. The Vorthok were about to learn what happened when they threatened a species that had never stopped perfecting the art of war. That the massive human fleet dropped out of hyperspace like a swarm of angry hornets. General Yura stood on the bridge of her command ship, watching as 15,000 human vessels took defensive positions around the Coalition's last stronghold. The fortress system of Kepler's Gate had never seen so many warships in one place. Coalition. Commander Veltar's hands shook as he watched the tactical displays. Each human ship was larger and more heavily armed than anything his people had ever built. Energy readings showed weapon systems that violated every principle of civilized warfare his species had developed over millennia. General Yura, welcome to Kepler's Gate, Veltar said through the translation system, his voice barely steady. We are grateful for your arrival, though we must discuss your fleet's weapon configurations. Many of your systems appear designed for planetary destruction rather than tactical engagement. Yura looked at the alien commander through the view screen. Veltar was tall and elegant, with blue skin and large eyes that reflected intelligence and deep sadness. His people had clearly suffered greatly, but they still maintained their civilized appearance and formal manners. Commander Veltar, our weapons are designed to kill enemies, Yura replied bluntly. All of them, permanently. That's how humans fight wars. The cultural exchange sessions that followed were more like interrogations. Coalition scientists and historians gathered in the main conference room, trying to understand how a species could remain so militarily focused after achieving space travel. They had expected humans to be similar to themselves, technologically advanced but evolved beyond primitive warfare. Dr. Kivanala, the Coalition's chief xenobiologist, pulled up holographic displays showing human history. Your species has been engaged in continuous warfare for your entire recorded history, she said, her voice filled with academic fascination and horror. Even after achieving nuclear weapons, you continued fighting with conventional forces. That's right, confirmed Major Park, the human cultural liaison. We've fought wars on every continent, in every climate, using every weapon we could imagine. We've had world wars, cold wars, proxy wars, and civil wars. Sometimes we fought multiple wars at the same time. The Coalition representatives exchanged worried glances. Commander Veltar leaned forward. But surely once you achieved interstellar travel, you moved beyond such primitive behaviors. The energy required for space colonization must have united your species. Major Park actually laughed. Commander, we militarized space the moment we got there. Our first orbital stations had weapons platforms. We've been planning space battles since before we could reliably reach our own moon. Engineer Naso joined the conversation, bringing up tactical displays that showed human fleet formations. We study every battle our species has ever fought. Ancient sword fights, medieval sieges, naval warfare, air combat, armored divisions, guerrilla tactics, urban warfare. We learn from all of it. The Coalition had spent centuries developing defensive technologies and diplomatic solutions. They had computer simulations that proved defensive warfare was more efficient than offensive campaigns. Their military doctrine focused on minimal casualties and proportional responses. Humans had taken the opposite approach entirely. They had spent thousands of years learning how to kill enemies as efficiently as possible, while protecting their own forces through overwhelming firepower. As the days passed, coalition leaders began to understand the terrifying truth about their new allies. Humans hadn't come to save the coalition out of kindness or galactic brotherhood. They had come because the Vorthok represented a threat to Earth, and humans had never met a threat they couldn't eliminate through superior violence. The Vorthok invasion fleet emerged from hyperspace, like a living nightmare. Thousands of bioships, each one a writhing mass of flesh and bone fused with stolen coalition technology, advanced toward Kepler's Gate. They had consumed 7 civilizations using the same strategy, and they expected this encounter to be no different. Admiral Kim Da watched from her command bridge as the enemy fleet took standard formation. The Vorthok creatures piloting those ships had evolved over millions of years to adapt to any threat. Their previous victories had made them confident, perhaps even arrogant. They were about to learn why that was a mistake. Colonel Lehigh, you are cleared for first strike, Kim Da announced over the fleet communications. Show them what humans do to uninvited guests. Colonel Lehigh smiled grimly from the bridge of her heavy cruiser Iron Hammer. Her ship carried the first wave of humanity's response, kinetic bombardment systems that the Coalition had never seen before. While alien civilizations had moved beyond crude projectile weapons millennia ago, humans had perfected the art of throwing things really, really hard. All batteries, fire, Lehigh ordered. The Iron Hammer's main guns launched tungsten rods at 30% the speed of light. No energy shields, no fancy deflector arrays, just dense metal moving fast enough to punch through a planet. The first Vorthok bioship simply ceased to exist, vaporized by impact forces that no living creature could adapt to. The Vorthok fleet paused, confused. In their biological memory banks, they had records of every energy weapon configuration used by advanced civilizations. Plasma cannons, particle beams, fusion bombs. They had genetic adaptations for all of it. But these humans were throwing rocks very fast, very deadly rocks. Second wave. Deploy nuclear package, Admiral Kim Da commanded. The Vorthok had encountered atomic weapons before, and developed biological filters to absorb radiation. But human nuclear weapons weren't just radioactive. They were designed to create maximum destruction through heat, pressure, and electromagnetic pulse. When the first nuclear torpedo detonated inside a Vorthok cluster formation, 6 bioships were instantly incinerated. The surviving Vorthok vessels tried to adapt, growing thicker armor and radiation-resistant shells. They had faced nuclear attacks from desperate coalition worlds and survived through biological evolution. But humans had spent decades perfecting nuclear warfare, creating weapons specifically designed to kill things that thought they were too tough to die. The second nuclear barrage used penetrator warheads that burrowed deep into bioship core before detonating. The third wave employed fusion bombs with depleted uranium casings that turned nuclear explosions into armor-piercing weapons. By the fourth wave, the Vorthok were no longer trying to adapt, they were trying to escape. Coalition. Observers watched in stunned silence as the legendary Vorthok fleet began retreating. These biological nightmares had never fled from any battle. They consumed everything in their path and grew stronger from each victory, but they had never fought humans before. Admiral, enemy fleet is withdrawing, reported Captain Yu from the tactical station. Should we pursue? Kim Da studied the tactical display, showing dozens of destroyed Vorthok bioships floating in space like dead whales. The survivors were fleeing in complete disorder, abandoning their standard hive mind formations. Let them go, she decided. They need to report back to their queen. Let her know that Earth is coming, and we're bringing everything we've got. For the first time in decades, the Vorthok had tasted defeat. Fleet Commander Park A stood in the war room, surrounded by holographic displays showing Vorthok-controlled space, Red markers indicated enemy breeding worlds, supply routes, and hive clusters. Unlike the Coalition's previous defensive campaigns, humanity was taking the fight directly to the enemy's home territory. "Gentlemen, ladies, we're not here to liberate," Planet Spark A announced to his senior officers. "We're here to make sure the Vorthok Empire never threatens anyone again. That means every breeding world gets sterilized, every supply line gets cut, and every hive cluster gets turned into floating debris." Captain Choiho reviewed the target list from his heavy assault ship Relentless Fire. The Vorthok had converted 12 former Coalition worlds into massive breeding facilities, each one producing millions of bio-warriors every month. Traditional military doctrine would focus on the most heavily defended targets first. Humans did things differently. "We hit the weak ones first," Choiho explained to his strike team, "force them to spread their defenses thin. When they try to reinforce, Major Han Ra's group cuts their supply lines and leaves them stranded." The first target was a former agricultural world that the Vorthok had turned into a nursery for their young. From space, it looked like a planet-sized infection, writhing. Biological masses covered continents, while spore clouds filled the atmosphere. The Coalition had classified it as beyond recovery, and written off the billion civilians who once lived there. Choiho's fleet took a more direct approach. Nuclear bombardment from orbit, followed by kinetic strikes to crack the planet's crust. Within 6 hours, the entire world was molten rock, cooling in space. No civilians to save, no infrastructure to preserve, just complete elimination of a Vorthok breeding ground. Meanwhile, Major Han Ra was implementing harassment tactics that drove the Vorthok command structure into chaos. Her fast attack squadrons hit supply convoys carrying biological material between breeding worlds. But instead of just destroying the ships, they poisoned the cargo with human-designed toxins that killed anything that tried to consume it. "The beauty of fighting biological enemies," Han Ra explained to her pilots, "is that they have to eat. Poison their food supply, and they starve themselves." The Vorthok had never faced an enemy that fought without rules or moral limitations. Coalition forces had always tried to minimize casualties and preserve infrastructure for future rebuilding. They fought defensive wars, designed to protect their civilian populations. Humans fought to win completely. When Vorthok reinforcements tried to protect their breeding worlds, they found their supply lines already severed. When they moved fleets to guard supply routes, human strike teams destroyed their forward bases. Every tactical response they made created new vulnerabilities that human forces immediately exploited. The Vorthok Queen Mind had coordinated successful campaigns against 7 advanced civilizations, using biological adaptation and overwhelming numbers, but her hive mind strategies depended on predictable enemy responses based on civilized warfare concepts. Park A's forces used tactics that no sane military leader would employ against a recoverable enemy. They poisoned solar systems to deny them to the Vorthok. They collapsed space lanes to trap enemy fleets. They even weaponized diseases specifically designed to target Vorthok biology. After 3 months of human counteroffensive operations, something unprecedented happened. Vorthok forces began withdrawing from outer colonies, consolidating around their core worlds in a defensive posture. The unstoppable biological empire was retreating, abandoning territory for the first time in their species' history. They had finally encountered an enemy more ruthless than themselves. Admiral Kim Da stared at the tactical display showing the Vorthok home cluster. 7 star systems packed with billions of bio-warriors, all surrounding the massive world where their Queen Mind had ruled for millennia. This was where the biological nightmare had begun its conquest of the galaxy. And this was where humanity would end it. The final battle would be unlike anything the universe had ever seen. Every remaining Vorthok creature had gathered here for their species' last stand. Bioships the size of moons floated in defensive formations while planet-sized hive structures bristled with organic weapons that could vaporize entire fleets. Commander Yu-Gen, status report on the planet crackers. Kim Da requested, over the communications system. Yu-Gen checked his readings from the engineering bay of the massive dreadnought. Final answer. All 12 devices are armed and ready, Admiral. Each one carries enough antimatter to split a world in half. The Vorthok won't be able to adapt to having their planets turned into asteroid fields. The Queen Mind felt something she had never experienced in her millions of years of existence. Genuine fear. Through the collective consciousness of her species, she could sense the approaching human fleet. These creatures fought like nothing. In her vast biological memory, they didn't seek to conquer or assimilate. They simply wanted everything Vorthok to stop existing. Lieutenant Nag coordinated the systematic assault from her position in the fleet's command center. Her job was to ensure that no Vorthok world, no matter how small or hidden, escaped destruction. Human reconnaissance had mapped every asteroid base, every hidden colony, every backup facility the biological empire had created. Phase 1 begins in 30 seconds. Naji announced to all ships. Remember, we're not capturing anything. We're not preserving anything. When we're done here, archaeologists will need to search through rubble to prove the Vorthok ever existed. The battle began with humanity's signature opening move, overwhelming nuclear bombardment. Thousands of atomic warheads streaked toward Vorthok defensive positions, while kinetic projectiles punched through bioship formations like armor, bullets through tissue paper. But this time, the Vorthok were ready. Billions of bio-warriors had been positioned throughout the cluster, their bodies modified specifically to counter human weapons. Radiation-absorbing organisms lined their ship hulls, while electromagnetic barriers deflected kinetic strikes. The Queen Mind felt a moment of hope as her defenses held against the initial human assault. Perhaps these aggressive mammals could be stopped after all. Then Commander Yu-Gen activated the planet crackers. The first antimatter device detonated at the core of a major Vorthok breeding world. The explosion literally split the planet apart, sending chunks of debris flying through space at devastating speeds. The debris struck other worlds, creating a chain reaction of destruction that no biological organism could possibly survive. Target: the Queen Mind's world directly, Admiral Kim Dar ordered. End this. 3 planet crackers struck the Vorthok homeworld simultaneously. The Queen Mind had just enough time to experience true terror before her consciousness, along with the entire biological empire she had built, was vaporized in a blast of pure antimatter energy. Lieutenant Nag watched her tactical display as red markers representing Vorthok positions winked out one by one. Within 6 hours, an empire that had conquered 7 civilizations and terrorized the galaxy for decades had been completely erased from existence. The silence that followed was deafening. No Vorthok distress calls, no biological signals, no hive mind communications, just empty space where humanity's greatest threat had once existed. The galaxy was safe, and everyone in it now knew exactly what happened to species that threatened Earth. General Li Min walked through the rebuilt Coalition Command Center, her boots echoing in halls that had once trembled with fear of Vorthok invasion. Now those same halls buzzed with activity as human patrol schedules were coordinated across dozens of star systems. The galaxy was free, but freedom came with a price that many civilizations were still struggling to understand. Coalition representatives gathered nervously around the conference table as Li Min reviewed the new security arrangements. These alien leaders had requested this meeting to discuss mutual cooperation and shared defense responsibilities. What they really wanted was to know if humans planned to leave or stay as permanent occupiers. General Li Min, we are grateful for your species intervention, began Ambassador Veltar, his blue skin pale, with barely controlled anxiety. However, some coalition worlds are concerned about the ongoing human military presence. Your patrol fleets are larger than our entire combined navy. Li Min studied the holographic display, showing human ships positioned throughout former Vorthok space. Each patrol group carried enough firepower to sterilize a solar system. The message was clear: nothing like the Vorthok would ever threaten galactic peace again. Ambassador, would you prefer we withdraw and let you handle the next existential threat yourselves? Li Min asked calmly. Because there will be a next threat. There always is. The alien representatives exchanged uncomfortable glances. They had spent centuries developing defensive technologies and diplomatic solutions. Yet all their advanced civilizations had been helpless against biological conquest. Meanwhile, humans had solved the problem in less than a year using weapons. Most species considered barbaric. On Earth, President Park so prepared for the most important speech in human history. Representatives from every surviving civilization would hear his address, broadcast across the galaxy on frequencies that reached even the most remote colonies. The message would establish humanity's role in galactic affairs for generations to come. Fellow sentient beings, President Park so began, his voice carrying to billions of listeners across hundreds of worlds. The Vorthok Empire is gone. Their breeding worlds are dust, their fleets are debris, and their queen mind is a memory. This galaxy is now free from biological tyranny, and it will remain free as long as humanity exists. The coalition leaders listening to the broadcast felt a mix of relief and terror. Humanity had indeed saved them all, but the cure might be more dangerous than the disease had been. Some of you fear human military power, Park so continued. That fear is reasonable. We have weapons that can crack planets and fleets that can sterilize star systems. We wage war with an efficiency that your civilizations abandoned long ago. But understand this, we do not seek to conquer you, we seek to protect you. General Li Min received reports from patrol commanders throughout the galaxy. Human fleets had established permanent bases in strategic locations, creating an overlapping network of defense that made surprise attacks impossible. Any hostile force attempting to threaten peaceful worlds would face immediate and overwhelming retaliation. The arrangement was simple but effective. Coalition species could continue their advanced research, their cultural development, and their peaceful evolution. They could trade freely, explore new worlds, and build the utopian societies they had always dreamed of creating. But if anyone threatened that peace, pirates, invaders, or another biological nightmare like the Vorthok, they would face humanity's full military might. The galaxy had learned a valuable lesson about the price of freedom. Sometimes peace could only be maintained through the promise of absolutely devastating war. And humans were very, very good at war.